Mexico.
Oh, you say Mexico? Why do you say that?
Because I think Texas is Mexico.
You think, oh, you think Texas? No, not including Texas. I'm talking about the present-day borders of Mexico. Now, I'm not talking about Mexico in 1846, which included the present-day states of Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, much of Texas, California. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about today's Mexico, the borders of today's Mexico. Which is bigger, Mexico or Alaska? No, it's Mexico. But it gives you some idea of the size that we're talking about. A lot of people don't know that. Traditional Mercator projections of maps make Mexico look kind of small and Alaska look kind of big. But it's not true. If you take a look at true geographic projections, okay, like equal area maps, like a Peters projection, it shows you how big Mexico actually is. That thought experiment, by the way, is done all the time in Africa, because a lot of people think Africa is a country and not a continent. Right? Africa is vast, vast. Okay? I mean, the country of the Sudan alone is as big as the entire United States east of the Mississippi. Okay? We're talking about a vast area. Okay? In any case, Lundy said that Americans had taken advantage of Mexican generosity. I mean, the impresarial system was generous. Jared Ellison Gross, right, who was a member of Stephen F. Austin's Old 300. How much acreage did that man get? He got well over 100,000 acres. Free. Free. Why? Because you got land under his impresarial contract. If you came to Texas, this was the primary enticement. You got land not just for your family, you got land for your slaves, and he showed up with 100 slaves. Okay? So, you know, basically Lundy was like, wait, what do you want? Especially since the United States at that time was in a recession, actually a depression. Right? And many of the people who had left and quote unquote gone to Texas, many of them were escaping the law. They were escaping their creditors. Okay? Texas was a utopia in many ways. As far as centralization, he said, Texans oppose centralization for the same reason that the United States counterparts have espoused nullification of states' rights. That is to safeguard slavery. Oppression didn't exist. The Mexican government was vacillating. The Mexican government was confused. The Mexican government, in many places and ways, was corrupt. It was dumb in some instances. But it was not cruel or oppressive. The Anglos who had settled, they had an inflated sense of oppression. And they wanted to establish slavery, which they saw as very profitable. Lundy's observations, of course, as I mentioned earlier, were based on first-hand knowledge. He was not some guy writing from some salon far away. Okay? He had spent more time in Texas than most of the people who were part of the Texas government after the Revolution. He knew what he was talking about. He was not talking about, Lundy, about people, and there were some, who came to Texas, who came here without slaves, such as Germans, who were working as farmers and ranchers, who were willing to work alongside their Mexican neighbors, and who did so with free labor, or by their own hand. He admired such people, okay? And as I indicated, he wanted to join them. He genuinely felt Texas represented a unique opportunity in that regard. I already talked about this. Move on. So let's do some analysis quickly then of the Texas Revolution and what life, liberty, and property, which is what the Texas Declaration of Independence says, by the way. Right? The American Declaration of Independence says what? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. An interesting 18th century Enlightenment ideal. But the American Constitution says what? Life, liberty, and property. Now, what does property mean within the context of a country where the chief form of property is human beings? This is the central dilemma. This is the dilemma that defines much of American history, and Texas is important historically because what? It was a dilemma that the Texans also had to deal with, okay? Human rights or civil liberties in this mindset, if you are a property rights fundamentalist, okay? And these other things, freedom of speech, press, assembly, these other sort of victimless crimes, okay? They're inseparable from and unthinkable outside of the context of property rights. This is more or less libertarian, for lack of a better term, libertarian dogma. An American libertarian is a private property rights fundamentalist. They cannot conceive of rights outside of the context of property rights. This is why most libertarians cannot, in an intelligent way, talk about slavery. Okay? One that is historically grounded. Okay? Justice and property in this mindset are identical in this thinking. Okay? The single largest property right thought to be important at that time was the idea of slavery's continued expansion. Okay? Let's talk briefly about the question of centralism versus federalism. One of the things that conventional Texas narratives talk about in terms of the importance of the Texas Revolution is that Santa Anna was a despotic usurper. He was a dictator. He was centralizing the Texas government, and the Texans had worked very hard to ensure protections for themselves and their peculiar institutions within a Mexican federal context. Okay? It was used to great propaganda advantage at the time. Okay? That's why the Anglos could say that Santa Anna's coming up here to enslave us, when in fact they were fighting for the right to enslave Negroes. Okay? Where does this originate? Well, Henry Adams talked about this in 1882. Okay? Because it's a lead-in to the Civil War. Whenever a question arose of extending or protecting slavery, the slaveholders became friends of centralized power. This is what happened in America prior to the Civil War. The American federal government in 1860-61 was a pro-slavery government. Slavery was protected where it existed. You had numerous compromises that had ensured the federal protection of the institution. The Fugitive Slave Clause, for instance. Okay? Among other things. The Dred Scott decision. Okay? Slavery, in fact, required centralization. So slaveholders and their advocates believed in a strong central government as long as it protected the institution. But whenever central governments started to act against slavery, then all of a sudden it became a question about rights and freedom. Here's what Frederick Burke, who wrote a book called Slavery and the Annexation of Texas in 1972, had to say about this. The explanation of the Texan Revolution, that it was an uprising against Mexican tyranny, is unfounded. That explanation was propaganda spread by Texans in the course of the war. The Mexican administration of Texas had been weak and vacillating. The central government had been disorderly. And the provincial government of Coahuila, Texas had been corrupt. That is true. Very true. But even Texan historians are now agreeing that Mexican rule had not been cruel or oppressive. The revolution was basically the outcome of the mating into the rich prairies of Texas, a race of aggressive and unruly American frontiersmen, masterful race of men who were contemptuous of Mexico and of Mexican authority. The old Latin mistake had been repeated of admitting Gauls into the empire. So, let's return now to the Civil War. Some of you said it was slavery. Some of you said it was the election of Lincoln. Some of you said it was taxes and tariffs. Let me take that one first. Taxes and tariffs were not the reason. That was what most of you said. Why do we know this? We know this because there was an actual secession convention. Every southern state that seceded from the United States of America had a convention and drafted documents that specifically stated why they were leaving the Union. This is not a matter of speculation. This is amply known. You will not find any Texas historian who argues otherwise. It's only when it starts becoming educational and political, when you move beyond the realm of scholarship, that this is even debated. There's no debate here, okay? When you read the Declaration of the Causes which impelled the state of Texas to secede from the federal union, here's what it actually says. And the primary preoccupation the document had was with the Fugitive Slave Clause. Okay? What was happening is that northern states, the New England states, Pennsylvania and others, what were they starting to do? They were starting to not return fugitive slaves who would come north on the Underground Railroad. They were starting to protect them. And the state legislatures were starting to pass laws that did what? That said, we're not going to return them south to these plantations. 12 Years a Slave has some of this in it, right? What the state of New York did, okay? So Texas, like the other southern states, was not for states' rights, it was against states' rights. You've probably not heard this explanation before, but that is actually what the historical record shows. If you have this conversation with anybody, that's actually the truth. It was not about states' rights, but it was not in the way a lot of these people think. Okay? Whenever states' rights opposed slavery, they were against states' rights. When it was for slavery, they were for it. Okay? The document also accuses the federal government of a litany of other sins, but primarily what lies behind it is the great truth, okay, that I indicated earlier that was in one of my slides. I have a couple of quotes there, but I'll read you this one again because it really gets to the point. Okay? We hold as undeniable truths that the governments of the various states and of the Confederacy itself were established exclusively by the white race, for themselves and their posterity, that the African race had no agency in their establishment, that they were rightfully held and regarded as an inferior and dependent race, and in that condition only could their existence in this country be rendered beneficial or tolerable. There is no speculation here. This is what they said. This is what the people of Texas voted on, overwhelmingly. By the way, that language is taken largely from the South Carolina document. South Carolina, of course, was the first state to secede, right? And you'll find that much of that Texas document does use similar language, especially the language that has to do with the Fugitive Slave Clause. Southern planters were obsessed with this idea of losing their slave property to runaways, okay? Now, as far as the election of Lincoln goes, is that mentioned in that document that I referenced? Yes, the election of Lincoln very much caused the Civil War. It was not the primary point, but it is mentioned in there, okay? The election of Lincoln was very much an exacerbating factor. So yes, the election of Lincoln, slavery, quote unquote, states' rights in the way that I've defined it, but not taxes and tariffs. Taxes and tariffs are mentioned once in the document. Okay. Here's another quote. That in this free government, all white men are and of right ought to be entitled to equal civil and political rights. That the servitude of the African race as existing in these states is mutually beneficial to both bond and free, and is abundantly authorized and justified by the experience of mankind and the revealed will of the Almighty Creator. What you'll find is that this language then became ensconced into the Confederate Constitution. Okay? The Constitution of the Confederate States of America has similar racial language in it. Okay? Now, this mindset was ensconced pretty much by the 1840s. So the stuff that I read you from 1861 only reflects what Hamilton Stewart, who was the editor of the Civilian and Galveston Gazette, wrote. The institution of slavery is engrafted upon our Constitution and interwoven with the very existence of the government. And its abolition would involve the overthrow of both, okay, as well as a train of evils, resulting not only in the destruction of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? This gives you some idea of the degree to which slavery and enslavement was part and parcel of the fundamental institutions of the country. Now, The Texas Revolution, therefore, looks a little bit different when looked at from this perspective. How revolutionary was it? Was it really a revolution? When you think of revolutions, what do you think of? Well, I mean, I cite the case of Haiti here. Haiti, of course, is what? The first revolution in the Western Hemisphere against the European power was the United States, right? The second was Haiti, the only successful slave rebellion in the history of the world. How did that work out for the Haitians? Not too well. Not too well. Haiti is still paying reparations to France for having the insolence of rebelling against France. Okay? Now it's become a charitable utopia. NGOs have really set up shop down there. Okay? But, you know, it depends on what your definition of a revolution is. If your revolution is that government changes, then yeah, the Texas Revolution was a revolution. Because you did have a government that was established as a consequence of a relatively small skirmish at a place called San Jacinto near Houston. But when you think of classic revolutions, such as the French Revolution, you know, let them eat cake, guillotines, you know, massive social upheaval that overthrew and that basically took more or less a ruling class and put them to the sword. That is not the Texas Revolution. In fact, the opposite took place. You had a group of people who fancied themselves elites, and they had become elites in Texas. In many ways, they were cast-offs in the United States who were running from the law or running from their creditors. But in a place like Texas, they could feel superior to what they considered to be inferior Mexicans, and blacks were the key to their success. And they decided to say, well, you know, we've come all this way, we gotta make this work. In Mexico, you guys aren't playing with the plan. You guys are abolitionists, you're a Mongol race. Matter of fact, you got some blacks in with you guys. Vicente Guerrero was an Afro-Mestizo who briefly occupied the presidency of the country in the late 1820s. And he established a decree that abolished slavery in Mexico, which frightened a lot of people in the northern territories, such as Coahuila and Texas, including many Tejano elites, such as Jose Antonio Navarro. Right? You all know about him? Now, this is not commonly known either. Who did Navarro support in the Civil War? Were the Mexicans who fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War? Yes. All four of Navarro's sons fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War. They're buried at the State Cemetery in Austin. Okay? But of course, the majority of the Tejano population did not. John Hope Franklin, there's a wonderful quote that I'd like to end with. The places that commemorate sad history are not places in which we wallow in remorse, but instead places in which we may be better moved to a new resolve to be better citizens. Explaining history from a variety of angles makes it not only more interesting, but also more true. When it's more true, more people come to feel that they have a part in it. That is where patriotism and loyalty intersect with truth. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I have some books back there for sale if you're interested.